So my family came to visit me over Christmas, and while they were here,
Mhm.
my sister picked up some gingerbread Oreos at the store, and she left them behind when she went home.
Okay.
And so I thought, what if instead of like a normal dirt cup with normal Oreos on top, I did a gingerbread dirt cup with raspberry swirl
Beautiful.
ice cream?
What?
I'm so excited. It looks so good. That looks like
Ooh.
shit in the camera, but in real
No,
life, it
it
looks delicious.
that looks so good.
Very excited.
Cool. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you.
I'm sure our listeners are happy for you too. Hello. Welcome to
Hi.
Ice Cream You Scream. We're your weekly scoop of the most chilling histories, mysteries, and true crime. My name is Kathryn.
I'm Gina.
So every month we choose a new topic and a new ice cream flavor to go along with it. And this month we are talking about cemeteries, and our ice cream flavor that you just heard Gina's brilliant rendition of is ice cream dirt cup. So grab a spoon and let's dig in.
I'm so excited to eat this.
Me too. That's how, I'm excited for you to eat it because that sounds very good. I have game day Oreos, football Oreos, and they're not the same color as regular Oreos, but they taste the same. They're like
Are they
a
in like,
lighter brown. I
oh,
think they're supposed to be a football, but it's not totally obvious. It's like not enough of a difference for it's one of those, it could be a football and it could just be like a dyeing error. I don't know.
at first I was picturing like Oreos that were shaped like footballs. Like, you know how Reese's does like
Mm-hmm.
Christmas trees and Easter eggs and shit? And I was like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
I've ever seen a not round Oreo.
Oreo, if you're listening, A, we're open to sponsors, and B, that's a good idea. So you should take it and also pay us for it. Because I'm sure we're the first ones to ever think of it ever.
Have you tried making them not circles?
Nut circles.
Some call me
Literally
a disruptor.
$400,000 million. Innovation station, baby. So yeah, we're really excited for today's story. So we are going to jump right in, but real quick, housekeeping things. We have a bunch of new listeners and like a measurable amount of new followers. So we just wanted to say hello and thank you for being here and thank you for coming and
Hi.
thank you for listening. The thing that would be very, very helpful to us, to all listeners, whether you are new or old, would be if you I tried to think of a way, like, what is it called when you've been listening to us since
If
the
you're an
beginning?
elder spoon.
If you are an elderly person, no, like, you've been around for a while, or if you're fresh, we'd love for you to go give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to us. If you're interested in sending us a story, we now have a link in our social profiles and on our website that will allow you to just submit a story directly to us. That way you don't have to go through email. If it is still easier for you to send us an email, that's great too. We will happily accept whatever way you want to send us a story. We just wanted to give you another option in case you want to send us through the link that is now available to you. We'll also have that linked below in our show notes moving forward just to make it easier. And yeah, I think that's all the housekeeping we have.
I think it is. And I think I'm ready to tell you a
I was going to
story.
say, I'm ready to jump in. I'm dying to hear you tell the story. I know the story, but I
Oh,
also know how you tell stories. So I'm like very excited for the Gina version of this story.
I think it's going to be a good combination of history, mystery, very little true crime.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be happy to know there are no decapitations or strangulations and no exhumations.
I am happy about all of those things. Thank
None
you
of
so
those.
much for
None
confirming.
of those this time. Yeah, so I have to
Okay,
double
cool.
down on my next episode. Get ready for that.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to set the scene a little bit for you. In San Jose, California, there is a house unlike any other, featuring stairways that disappear into closed ceilings, doors that open nowhere, and literal rooms within rooms. This house has captivated public curiosity for over a century. Since it opened as a tourist attraction in the 1920s, millions of tourists have wandered its maze of corridors, asking the question, why would someone build a house like this? Who were they trying to stop from getting out? Today, I'm going to be talking about the Winchester Mystery House. And let me tell you, researching this was a wild fucking experience. I've texted Kathryn about this a little bit already because I was really going through it with this one. But
it's true.
Yeah. Like on multiple occasions. Before I get into the actual story of this house, I want to explain why I picked it during Cemetery Month. Because a tenuous connection kind of got more tenuous the more that I researched this. So before I started looking into the history of the house, I knew the basics of it, or I thought I knew the basics of it. And if you don't know what the Winchester Mystery House is, the story goes that it's this house in California that was built by a woman who intentionally created kind of a labyrinth of a home in order to trap spirits that were haunting her, effectively creating a cemetery for ghosts. That is why I picked it, because I thought I knew those things. I was fucking wrong. But I was not wrong because I'm an idiot.
Also not,
Yeah, I was also not wrong, kind of. It's because the stories that we have all been told about this house are, for the most part, completely untrue. So, like I said, if you haven't heard about this house already, buckle up, because to the best of my ability, I'm going to tell you the true story behind it and about the life of its owner and architect, Sarah Winchester. So let's start at the top. Sarah Winchester was born Sarah Lockwood Pardee on June 4th, 1839 in New Haven, Connecticut. She was a Gemini, which is fine. It's a good thing.
I was gonna this is you just experienced real time Gina like walking herself through it. Like, how do we feel about this one? This is good. Okay, moving
New Year's resolution. I'm not going to be as judgy about zodiac signs anymore.
Oh, I am. Fuck that. But I'm happy for you. I love that for you. Geminis I'm fine with. I feel like Libras are one of the only... I shouldn't say that. I'm already getting too deep. You did a good job. I'm the one doing a bad job right now.
I'm going to plead the fifth. I have no opinions on anything having to do with it.
I did. Please continue.
Okay, so Sarah was named after an older sister named Sarah who had died before our Sarah was born. And she died of cholera when she was pretty young. She was the fifth child and fourth daughter born to parents Leonard and Sarah. So Sarah, the mom, named her first child Sarah after her. That Sarah died.
Dope.
And then she named a second child after her, which I think is dope because you don't hear about women naming their daughters after themselves very much.
I feel like that used to be more common. Like this time period that you're talking about, I'm not as surprised, but it's still like quite rare. And I feel like that's more of like a biblical thing versus I'm naming you after me.
Yeah.
Kind of the same deal how everyone's name was Mary. Sarah, I feel like, is another one. But yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Also love that her middle name was Lockwood.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I missed that part.
So cool.
I didn't register that. Yeah.
Yeah. Very sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
And by all accounts, the family that she grew up in kind of rocked. Apparently, her parents were really outspoken about things like abolition, suffrage, and animal rights, which was pretty rare for that time. And Sarah kind of took after them as she started growing up, particularly like an environmentalism piece. She was very into the environment and caring for it. It's reported that she wasn't as social as her siblings. Like, she was still a good sister. She was just one of those kids who was kind of on the quiet side and liked to keep to herself. But she was also incredibly intelligent. She had a great education. Her family were upper middle class, but they were like Connecticut upper middle class. So they had money to get her the best education they could. She had a private French tutor. She took music lessons. She was like a total whiz at languages, actually. I think she spoke like 5 languages by the time she was 12, which is just crazy to me. So she
Wow,
grew
that's
up as
not
this
normal for Americans.
crazy, right? Yeah. So she grew up as this like kind of quiet but really intelligent girl who turned into a really intelligent woman. When Sarah was 23, she married a guy named, amazing name alert, William Wirt Winchester.
Wirt? You've already
Wirt.
told me so much that I did not know. William Wirt.
Wirt.
All right.
William Wirt. Yep.
Whatever works.
They got married on September 30th, 1862. They had been childhood friends and neighbors when they were growing up, and William's sister was one of Sarah's classmates. So it was like we've always been friends. Let's call a spade a spade. We love each other kind of thing. Cool. He was, at the time they got married, he was a 25-year-old son of a very wealthy shirt manufacturer. But within a few years of their marriage, his dad went on to establish the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. So basically like a gun and ammunitions company, specifically repeating firearms. I myself am not a gun fanatic. I don't know how many gun fanatics listen to this, but if you've ever heard of like a Winchester rifle, this company is where it gets its name. It was a very, very successful company, and it led to just insane amounts of wealth for the entire Winchester family. A few years after they were married, Sarah gave birth to a baby girl named Annie. But unfortunately, Annie suffered from a nutrient deficiency and died roughly a month after she was born. And it wasn't like they starved her to death or anything like that. She had something called marasmus, which I had never heard of before. And it's basically when your body can't metabolize proteins, and so you die. And this was just a devastating blow to Sarah and William. So Sarah, who was already a really private person, retreated from society for an entire year. Barely anyone saw her for a year, which I kind of get. By this point in time, William and Sarah were working on a construction project to build their first home together. And they had each started picking up on architecture and interior design concepts during the process, to the point where it kind of became a hobby for Sarah. She got really, really into architecture and construction and building things. So I don't know this for a fact, but I imagine that during that year she was away from society, she really dove deep into that hobby, as you would when you need a distraction from something. Again, I don't know that for a fact, but architecture shows up later in her life in a big way. So that's what I would assume. When they're home,
they're still in Connecticut at this point.
Okay. They're still in Connecticut. Yeah.
Okay.
When their first home was completed in 1868, it was 20,000 square feet. It had over 20 rooms, marble floors, a chandelier, multiple chandeliers, one of those big like circular driveways. It had the works. It was gorgeous. Like Jesus. When I said Winchester Repeating Arms Company made bank, I meant it. Like they have so much money. But all the money in the world couldn't stop further tragedy from befalling Sarah. The year after the house was built, her dad died at the age of 60. We think it was from rheumatoid arthritis. And that alone is a huge loss, especially since it was only a few years after she lost her daughter. But when the 1880s came around, Sarah suffered 3 more huge losses within a year. So between 1880 and 1881, her mother, her father-in-law, and her husband all died. And her husband died of tuberculosis, which is another recurring theme in my stories.
Yeah. Well, and that's just...
I think it's more a product of the time.
That's the time period. Yeah, you can't tell a historical story from the 1800s without TB being involved. Yeah.
True.
Still sad. That is still sad.
That's rough. By the time she was 41, she had lost her husband, her child, her dad, her father-in-law, her mom, like so many crucial people, like pillars of your life, you know, that you think are always going to be there. And she just lost all of them. So to cope with it, she did the reasonable thing and took a very extended trip to Europe. We don't know exactly what she did while she was in Europe. Again, she was a super private person. But there are some suspicions that she got involved with the co-ed Freemason movement over here, because a co-ed Freemason movement had started. And the area that she grew up in on the East Coast back at home, that's kind of like Freemason Central. So They think she may have been involved with the Freemasons. Now, Gina, I hear you say, but Sarah's a woman in the 19th century. How can she have enough money to travel so far and wide? Fear not, because I will tell you. So with all of these deaths came a bunch of wills that left Sarah money. And she came into a fucking pile of wealth. We estimate that she was worth $20 million at the time in the
Whoa.
1880s, which based on my math is $619 million or 494 million pounds. And
That's a lot of money.
eventually she gained a 50% ownership in the Winchester Repeating Arms Company because people would leave her their shares when they died. And that brought in additional income of $1,000 a day, which is $30,000 a day by today's standards, or 24,000 pounds per fucking day. And all of that
That's
made Sarah
unreal.
one of the richest women in the world.
I can't believe that didn't make her the richest woman in the world.
Right?
I mean, probably besides like queens and stuff. That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah, it was
That's
an
so much money.
incredible amount of money for someone who's like not married, no kids, just so much money to spend on whatever
Yeah.
she wanted. So spend on whatever she wanted, she did, which leads me to the next piece of this story. So a few years pass when she's in Europe. She comes back to Connecticut eventually, but she found it more and more difficult to be there because she was kind of surrounded by all of these places and houses that reminded her of everyone that she had lost. On top of that, she had also started suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which is what we think her dad died of. So her doctor recommended that she leave Connecticut and go somewhere with a warmer, drier climate. So, in the mid 1880s, she decided to move to California. A lot of her family members had already kind of moved out there anyway, so it made sense. Plus, it was what her doctor wanted her to do, and she just wanted to be close to, what was left of her family. This next part is a complete aside, but it's such a fun fact, and I wanted to tell you about it. So when she was moving to California, she was concerned about like the time it takes to find a new doctor when you move. And so she didn't want like a lapse in medical care. So as soon as she got to California, she hired a personal doctor named Euthanasia Mead, who was one of the first female physicians to work in California.
Euthanasia Mead?
Euthanasia Mead.
What the fuck?
Yeah, but then she died in 1895, shortly after.
Sorry, that's not funny though. It's just that was a really abrupt, like, oh, but also
She died too.
don't get too attached.
But yeah, Euthanasia
Wow.
Mead doesn't really have a whole lot to do with this story. I just thought, damn, that's the coolest name ever.
Is that a name? Like, are there people walking around Earth right now with the name Euthanasia?
Surely not now, right? Not until I have a child.
I mean, if you say it out of context of everything else in the world, it is a pretty word. Oh my god, I literally just Googled euthanasia name and the AI overview is, quote, it would be considered inappropriate and insensitive to use the word euthanasia as name for your person or pet. The word euthanasia is associated with the practice of ending a life to relieve suffering. That is such a hard opinion.
Euthanasia.
Yeah. Wait, oh my god. I want to do that. I want a dog named Euthanasia.
And this is my cat, capital punishment. Yeah.
This is blowing my mind. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, just needed to share that.
Yeah.
So back to Sarah. Eventually, a few of her siblings, the ones that were still in Connecticut, like went to California as well, and they all kind of lived there. But regardless of where they lived, whether or not they were close to her, she supported all of them financially for the rest of their lives. Now, going back to that house that I mentioned earlier. So this house is the next house that she buys is the one that would eventually become the Winchester Mystery House. She bought it in 1886 for $12,570. And when she got it, it was an 8-room house on basically just this big plot of land in the Santa Clara Valley. And it was on a road called Santa Clara Los Gatos Road. Fun fact, that road is now called Winchester Boulevard. And for those of you who are interested, because I definitely was, that 12 and a half grand she spent on the house in 1886 would be worth $386,000 today, or 309 pounds. So it obviously wasn't called the Winchester Mystery House when she bought it. When she got it, she actually named it Llanada Villa, after a place in Spain called Llanada Alvasa, which she had visited with her husband 10 years earlier. Apparently they had like really enjoyed being there, and so she wanted to name it kind of in honor of that. Her initial plan was to have a house that her entire family could live in with her, but like I said, that just didn't wind up happening. They would come to stay for like short stints of time, but never for long. It was mostly just Sarah and the staff that she hired. So the reason why her family didn't live with her, though, was in part because the house was kind of isolated, but also because it was under constant construction. Within 6 months of having it, Sarah expanded the house from 8 rooms to an estimated 26. At the start, she had 2 architects helping her with this, but they didn't last long. It's kind of speculated that they weren't of the caliber that she was used to working with on the East Coast. So instead, she got rid of them and she just said, fuck it, I'm going to run this whole construction project by myself. But because she was more or less self-taught, she was not a conventional architect by any stretch of the imagination. Usually when you build a building, you go at it with like an overall plan of, you know, this is how many rooms it's going to have, this is how many floors, this is the general shape. You have like the big picture what you're going to do. Sarah did not do that. She just went room by room, designing the things that she was feeling like designing at the time. And if she wound up designing a room that she later on like if it didn't turn out the way she wanted it to, she would just scrap the whole room and start over again. So, Yanada Villa turned into essentially her passion project. Some people make scrapbooks, some collect stamps. But if you have the money, like, why not build this fucking weird ass house? So over the years that she lived there, she added a ton of ornamentation, which I do want to talk about because the things that she did to the house are really interesting. And it includes regular uses of the number 13. Some closets had 13 hooks. There were 13 ceiling panels in the entrance hall. There's a window that has like 13 decorative balls in it. The number 13 cropped up in the house over and over and over again. And we don't really know why. This is something that people point to as a sign that, like, oh, she was a mad woman. She was into the occult. You know, that's not necessarily true. We have no proof of those things. It's more likely that it was actually just her lucky number. Later on, when she eventually dies, she would also have a 13-page will that she signed 13 times. Like, she just liked the number
weird.
13. Yeah. She was a kind of a weird lady, but she was cool. So back to the house. It also had this like insanely intricate hardwood flooring. It had walls that were embossed to look like leather or metal. There were windows that looked like spider webs, which made me think of you when I saw them because I feel like you would totally do that. It had an indoor garden, German
I would do that too. I would
chandeliers,
do all of this. Yeah.
French paintings.
I love it. I would love. Sorry, this is well, it's not an aside, but have you ever been to this house?
Nope.
Have you ever visited? Yeah, we need to add this to our travel list. It is at the top of
Agreed.
my spooky travel list.
I would love to go there. Yeah.
Yeah.
She just went fucking nuts on this thing, including like she added multiple new stories to the home, including my favorite part, which is she added a 7-story tower that a local newspaper, the San Jose News, reported that she rebuilt 16 times before she was happy with it.
That just, like, everything I know about this story, I feel like I react very similarly every time I hear it or read about it or see it or anything like that. I'm just like, the amount of time and energy that would go into this. I don't think, not to speak for everyone, I'll just speak for myself. I can't imagine that. Just to like casually rebuild.
Yeah.
Forever? Like,
for fun. Yeah.
Just, that's literally like how she spent her entire life.
She was so smart. And she was so unafraid of fucking up and trying again because she had the money to do it.
Yes. You know what? This is the best I can do. The best comparison I can make, the most extreme version of this that I have is hanging pictures on the wall. Like, oh, let's put it here and see if that works. Nope, don't like it. Let's like move it over an inch and see what that looks like. Nope, let's go up a little bit. And she's doing that with a whole house.
Whole ass house. Mm-hmm.
That just like blows my mind.
Yeah, totally agree. And to be fair, like I don't know if the story about rebuilding that tower 16 times is true, because the media was party to spreading like a lot of lies about her, so it's hard to verify, and we'll get more into that later.
But there are okay, yeah, that's true. I won't say much until you say that. It's just like
but regardless,
that's not the only
like,
that's not the only thing. Like, you know, if she didn't like a certain room, she would just stop and go. Like that's the same vibe. That's like a similar regardless if she rebuilt this thing 16 times, there are other pieces of the story that are the same like concept or whatever,
same
which is
vibe.
still baffling. Right.
Yeah.
Just wild.
All of these changes that she was making to her house and her lack of a general direction with it kind of made it turn into this twisty, turny kind of patchwork of a home. But the staircases led somewhere. The doors opened to other rooms. It was not the Winchester Mystery House that we know today. It was like, for all intents and purposes, it was a normal house, just like a little bit eccentric. It wasn't crazy like people know it is now. Okay. And this construction, this style of construction that she used would continue for about 2 decades. Like she really did not let up on it. It was a project that lasted her pretty much her entire rest of her life.
How can you remind me how old she was when she started?
So she was in her 40s.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. I couldn't remember. Okay.
Yeah. Because her and William had been married about, I think, 20 years when he died. So
and she started this right when she moved out there, right? She like bought
there was a brief period of time where I think she stayed at a hotel for a little bit. Okay. I think I found a record of that. And so it wasn't like she bought the house and immediately moved in day of. There was a little bit of a lapse, but not long. And this also was not the only home that she owned. She kind of became like a property collecting machine, like a real life game of Monopoly, which is kind of gross now that I think about it.
I was just going to say. God,
but there were fewer people.
Yeah, there were fewer people. And it's definitely better. Also, like, this is kind of annoying, but like, she's a woman with money, so I immediately am like, go girl. Like, do whatever you want. She was one of very few able to do what she actually wanted. So, like, no judgment. Things were different. That, like, owning property back then was not the same as just gobbling up property now when you know there are people who can't afford your rent. Like, that's a whole different, different issue.
It's interesting that you bring that up because one of the next things I want to talk about is how judgy the locals started to get about Sarah Winchester. First, the problem was, you know, they were used to millionaires who lived like socialites, attended and hosted galas. Like they were used to people who were very loud about their wealth. And Sarah wasn't any of that. And all of this was coming at a time when the US was suffering from a depression. So there were people that were really struggling with things like income and cost of living. And Sarah, from their perspective, was just like flaunting how much money she had by buying house after house and property after property. So there was a little bit of that going on. I don't think to the same degree there is now, because these days with social media, it's so much more, you know, universally everyone can pile on someone else. Yeah. But by back then standards, there was definitely tension.
Interesting.
Which feeds into some of the things we think we know about the house. I'll get more into it. It's a whole thing.
Gina's like, come on, let me keep going. Go, girl, give it to me.
Okay. So, and this lack of appearance in the public eye, combined with those economic difficulties that I mentioned, is what caused rumors about Sarah Winchester to start spreading in kind of a big way. A few years after buying Yanata Villa, the San Francisco Chronicle published an article that said, and this is a quote, "The sound of the hammer is never hushed. The reason for it is in Mrs. Winchester's belief that when the house is entirely finished, she will die." And that was completely baseless. For one thing, there's no record of Sarah being afraid that she would die if construction stopped. And construction did stop pretty regularly. We have at least one record of where it stopped for an entire summer just because it was too hot and she didn't feel like working. So she felt like her workers wouldn't want to work either. So even though it only stopped for short stints of time, it did stop occasionally. So in Sarah, the people of California had kind of found the perfect person to hate. Because in their eyes, she was this mysterious, crazy widow who, like I said, flaunted her money. So they made up stories. And those stories still live on to this day. So, despite her growing home, Sarah started becoming more and more reclusive as the years went by. And there are a couple of stories about Sarah being a recluse that I want to tell you because I think they're kind of funny. So there are reports that in 1901, there was drama when President McKinley visited Santa Clara Valley and Sarah didn't invite him to visit her because apparently he had known her husband and they were in not the same social circles, but it was like kind of seen as offensive that she didn't even extend an invite. And then there's also a story 2 years later in 1903 where Teddy Roosevelt, like President Roosevelt, tried to visit her, but when he got to her house, the gate was locked.
Like she just said, no, thank you, basically.
So it turns out she just wasn't at home. She was helping her niece prep for her wedding. So like there was an excuse for it, but it's just so funny.
Way
that
funnier.
Like,
It's funny to just think that she was just like, oh, I can't be bothered with the president and with
not today. Not today, Teddy.
I like.
Why she's British.
I don't blame her though. Meeting important people is stressful.
Seems like a lot of work because you have to use all those forks and spoons and.
Yes, that's the reason why. And then you have to like point them in the direction of the bathroom. What if they ask for a tour? It's like I don't know.
It's like I have 8 million rooms here, and I should probably mention that like. She didn't stop at 26 rooms. The house had right now the house has I think 160 estimates
right now, like
that it
2025.
I think so. Yeah, 2025. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's in the mid 100s.
I think so too.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like multi-hundreds when she was there.
Okay. Isn't part of it like, and this might be something that you debunked, but isn't part of the lore that nobody knows exactly how many rooms there are? Like
there's a reason for that.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll touch on it later. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll touch on it later. Another thing that I wanted to share that happened, and this is what I'm about to tell you is what made me decide I wanted to do this as an episode because it pissed me off so bad.
Oh God. Okay.
Get ready for rage. So in 1902, when Sarah was in her 60s, there was this guy named D.F. McGraw, and he was running for an elected seat that was like county assessor. I had to look up what that meant. I still don't really know what it means. It seems like it's just the dude who makes sure that houses are valued fairly. He goes to the press when he's running for this election, and he started slandering Sarah. Saying that her properties had been assessed as only being worth $640 when in reality, like they were worth at least $80K. And basically she had been like facilitating this lie about how much wealth she had, blah, blah, blah. And so he said, if you vote me in, I will fix this. And Sarah, who like is very rarely publicly outspoken, sent him a letter that was published in the newspaper effectively calling him out and saying he was a liar and that the only reason he said that about her is because she was a woman who couldn't vote, so he knew he could get away with it.
Wow.
He went on to lose the election.
Fuck that guy, but that's cool.
Fuck that guy.
Like,
fuck yeah, Sarah.
Response to that is so cool.
Right? Just a cool
Especially
lady.
Like the fact that she was known to be that's the thing. All I knew about her, this is why I was so excited for you to tell the story, because the stories I've heard have been about how she was a crazy, kooky recluse, and that is it. Like, nothing about any... Man, see...
Yeah. Because, like, recluse, yes. Kooky, definitely. But it's the crazy part that, like, got me all riled up when I was...
Sure is.
So we'll get into it. Well, yeah.
My heart rate's elevating so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but McGraw, I mean, he was not the only person to target Sarah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many instances of this happening in the media and other places. Someone with that much money, let alone a woman with that much money at the time, made people just want to spread rumors about her.
I'm still on like the whole assessment thing. Like, and his weapon of choice is like, I'm trying to keep my thoughts like in summary mode. They're subjective and they're comparative, basically. Like if you say, oh, this house is worth X amount, it's based on other houses in the area and what people are willing to pay for those. So like if people don't like this woman, they are going to be less willing to spend a lot of money should they ever buy her house. So
That's a good point.
you could easily say, yeah, it's only worth this much, and therefore it is true because you just said that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
That's literally all it's based on. It's comparative and it's subjective. But if people in charge of assessing my home in the area, I'm just kidding. Your job's
I know. I
real
was like, do you
and
think a county
matter.
assessor is going to listen to this and be mad at us?
I don't know how it works now. I don't know if it's the exact same process. I just know home assessments are done that way. It's like comparative.
I guess it would make sense if the process had changed since the 1880s.
I hope so, but also like, dude, you'd be surprised. Like, not much of my house has changed since the early 1900s, so like maybe not. The electric as of last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, all these rumors that people and news outlets were spreading about her, like it made sense. You know, she had a massive house, but she rarely entertained guests. She collected houses and property like nobody's business. She was extremely philanthropic. She gave tons and tons of money away, particularly to like tuberculosis wards because of her husband. But all of her donations were anonymous. And so everyone thought that she was basically a penny pinching bitch in a time when a lot of people were suffering economically. So
while
she was
everyone
labeled.
else is like announcing to like near and far
Yes.
how
It's because she wasn't loud enough about the good things that she did that she was labeled a mad woman with a house to match. But Sarah didn't really give a shit.
Good for her.
Which is why we have so many of these stories today. That's why everyone thinks that she was this crazy lady. And I want to give you an example of her not giving a shit because it's so funny. So the San Francisco Examiner reportedly said once that Sarah was considering selling Yanata Villa, and it reiterated that rumor that she was afraid if she stopped construction on the house that she would die, right? Rumors kept spreading about it. And so Sarah responded to it by selling one of her many homes.
I've always loved the story of Sarah Winchester, but I loved those stories as her being a kooky, crazy recluse. And now I'm like, man, I love her so much more now.
She seems like, so cool.
Even if she was a kooky, crazy, quote unquote, recluse, like, still love her. But like, the idea that, now here's the thing, and I don't want to steamroll anything, but I will say, like, after experiencing so much loss, and she has her own health problems, like she's away from where she grew up, like she's in this whole new space and she doesn't want to see anyone, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure there was plenty of like mental health things going on that people didn't really care about because she was just a woman with money, you know? There probably was some issues with that, especially when it comes to like her being a recluse and not wanting to talk to people and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm still like Team Sarah.
I know.
Like that
seriously, Team Sarah.
I feel for her, and I also support her kookiness entirely.
Me too. Yeah. And she was like definitely eccentric. And that started when she was a kid. Like she was always kind of like an oddball, but not like a eating roadkill oddball. She was just like, you know, a little bit weird.
Isn't it so funny that like, especially, well, I don't want to say especially nowadays, but maybe in our demographic, we all want to be like, you know, the crazy neighborhood witch or whatever. At least I do. Maybe I'm just projecting here. But like, it's so easy to like say you want to be that, but then when you're when you hear a story about like a kooky, eccentric woman, it is like, oh, like she was just mad or whatever.
And that's
It's,
what pisses me off about this story
yeah,
is that it was designed to be a bad thing and to hurt
yeah.
her. Like none of the
And I'm
things
not
that they
saying
said about
everyone
her
thinks that,
are
but yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So in 1906 when Sarah was in her late 60s, a devastating earthquake struck California and
Mm.
Yonata Villa was severely damaged. The tower collapsed along with the third and fourth floor additions and most of the chimneys. Plaster, wood, and tile work was all destroyed. We don't believe Sarah was home when this happened. The historians have found a letter to her lawyer that suggests she was at one of her other homes that was about 35 miles away. So she was safe. But when she heard
Mm.
about the damage, she immediately wanted to make sure that all of the debris at Yonata Villa was cleared away. And she started focusing on making the house safe again. Not like livable, but just so that when people walk in, they're not in danger of like it crashing down on them or
Like
something.
nothing's going to fall on them. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So only the essentials were done. She didn't undertake any additional building work on the house ever again, with the exception of adding an elevator about a decade later. Now, this earthquake and the way that they fixed it up afterwards to make it safe left the house with even more peculiarities. Things like water pipes jutting from the wall, doors opening to nothing where balconies had once been, and where staircases used to lead to another level, they now just went into the ceiling. So that's why that house
Oh.
is like that with the staircases and the doors and all of that.
Okay, but they all just made us think that she was just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But really,
Yep.
she just didn't want to
Kill
rebuild what
anyone.
she had already
Right,
rebuilt.
because she was getting up there in age. She was still
Yeah.
suffering from arthritis. Actually, by
Mm-hmm.
around this time, her arthritis had gotten to the point where it was difficult for her to walk and write, let alone try
Mm.
and design like a new version of this house. So, about a
Mm.
year after the earthquake, she moved her full time residence to another one of her properties, and she effectively left Yanata Villa behind in all but name. She wound
Mm.
up dying of heart failure on the 5th of September, 1922, at the age of 83. So she lived like a nice, good, long
Oh,
life. Yeah.
yeah.
Her body was taken back to Connecticut, and she was buried next to her husband and their daughter, Annie. Getting to the part that pisses me off. Despite how much the public had demonized her, they really didn't seem to give a shit when she died at all. There was very little reporting on the fact that Sarah Winchester had passed away.
Hmm.
One place did write about it, though. An excerpt from the Mill Valley Record around the time that she died had an editorial, and I'm going to read you a quote from it because it kind of broke my heart a little bit. A
Mm.
few days ago, a quiet woman went quietly out of life, leaving a fortune of some millions, all of it for philanthropy. She had no children, so she gave her stocks and bonds, her wealth of whatever form, to the public in the most advantageous manner possible. How many thousands of lives will be blessed by Mrs. Winchester's bequest? Yet the newspaper accounts of her going and its attendant circumstances were brief and unadorned. So it's like,
Mm.
oh, she did so much
Yeah.
good, and just nobody gave a shit because they already thought that they knew her story.
That's one of those things that, like, things happen so fast nowadays. Like, you can ruin someone's reputation with, like, the click of a button nowadays.
Mm,
But, like, that doesn't mean that it didn't happen, like, all throughout history as well. I
mm-hmm.
feel like, try not to go on a tangent. This is going to make me sound so elderly and curmudgeon-y. This, like, how information can spread so far and wide now can be very damaging. But at the same time, it's so nice that, like, all these years later, we now have this new lens with that we can look at things like this
That
through
is true.
and
Yeah.
spread that information. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's where my head's at right now, because that's so sad, and that's so, she was so judged, just like people are judged today. And now I'm like, man, who are we judging right now that, like, 50 years
Oh,
from now
well,
we're gonna be
God,
like,
like Amanda Bynes. Remember that whole thing? And people
oh
were
my god,
so
yeah,
mean
when
to her.
everyone, she told us everything, and everyone just like,
Yeah.
oh, she looks weird now, so LOL.
And Britney
Yes,
Spears, we did it with her too.
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking about. Yes. So now, like, I see people talk about, it's usually women, young
Hmm.
women, or women of any age. And it's like, man, but we're still doing it. They're still celebrities. Like, we're just picking them apart
Yeah.
for no reason.
Yeah.
But that's
and
where
that
my head's
whole
at when you talk about her.
Yeah, and the whole like picking Sarah apart thing didn't stop when she died either. Like I'll tell you
Oh,
about
yeah,
the
no.
tours and like
Mm-hmm.
the stories that they would tell
Yeah.
them. So after she died, all of her properties were sold, but Yanata Villa, it was in such a state that like nobody would want to buy it because it was like
Mm-hmm.
stairs to nowhere and pipes jutting out of the wall and shit.
Mm-hmm. Well, it
So
was
this
assessed
dude,
very poorly.
it was assessed very poorly.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So this dude named John H. Brown took over the lease, and less than a year after Sarah died, he opened it as a tourist attraction, which we now know as the Winchester Mystery House. And as part
Okay.
of that attraction, you could take tours of the house, and you still can.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, they would tell you the quote unquote true story of Sarah Winchester. And a lot of it was not fucking true. They were telling sensational stories to get a sensational reputation. A lot of the times, like the things that they said were blatantly untrue. And there are even stories of tour guides being told to make things up if they didn't know the answer to a question. Yeah. So I'll give you a few examples of like what
Yes,
they
please
said
do.
was the truth.
Yeah.
So they said that after William had died, Sarah visited a medium in Connecticut who told her that because her wealth came from a gun company, a lot of the blood was on her hands. And so she was
Yeah.
being cursed by the people who those guns have killed. So she had to move to California to escape them. That's a very popular myth about Sarah
I've
Winchester.
heard that story.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that one. Yes.
Yeah. They also said that Sarah had built that house intentionally to confuse and trap the spirits that wound up following her. They also said she would host seances every single night in her seance room where the spirits would tell her what to build the next day. There was no record
Yeah.
of her ever meeting with that medium. We know the house looks strange because A, a novice architect built it, and B, the earthquake. And there are
Mhm.
no contemporary records of her ever holding seances. And the quote unquote seance room is suspected to have been her gardener's private room. So this went on, these lies went on for years and years and years until the legend became in society's minds the truth. And in many ways, it still is today. It's on the National Register of Historic Places, and its entry in there attributes its construction to those rumors. Like it says it as if it's
Hmm.
truth. This is a modern issue.
That's so interesting because I know that all contributed, all of those stories contributed to the whole, like, oh, she's crazy
Yeah.
reputation. And, like, from my perspective, I'm like, so what if that was true? Like, even if all of that was true, so what? Like, who
Yeah.
cares? I go to fucking psychics
Yeah.
all the time.
And that's why when I was researching it, I had such a hard time figuring out why it was making me so angry because of that exact thing. I was like, it would be fine if she did all of that stuff. But it's the fact that they made up those rumors that they knew were untrue. And a lot of them came from people or media outlets that were saying those things to harm her. It's the
They had
intention
an
to
agenda.
harm.
That's,
And
yes.
yeah, it's the agenda, the intention to harm her or her
Yeah.
reputation before and after death that pisses me off.
Yeah, and I think even just I'm thinking of when you were talking about people associating her love or fascination or whatever with the number 13 with like the devil. Like I know a lot of people are like,
Yes.
"Oh, it's such an unlucky number." That is also actually not true. That is like a very Christian Eurocentric idea of the number 13. The number 13 is actually in like pagan times and like other cultures is thought to be a sign of like fertility and luck. Like
Oh, that's interesting.
The number 13 is actually a lucky number in pagan cultures. Yeah.
Because I also think on top of that, it's also like it could be a Freemason thing because Freemasons like kind of have a history with I don't cryptography, I think is the right word, like the encryption of things and like puzzles and numerology, that kind of thing. I mean, there are so many reasons why she could have been into that. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the whole pagan occult thing, that sounds like it was a rumor, but that it could have stemmed from, like, that rumor could have stemmed from the use of 13, but the use of 13 could have been, I mean, you said she had a history with, like, Freemason or whatever. So that would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Basically,
it's
the
interesting.
takeaway is like, no matter which parts of this is true, none of it makes her crazy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I think that's the takeaway that we're trying to get across.
Yeah. And you can still go on tours of the Winchester Mystery House for just $38.99.
Yeah.
A tour can be yours. These days, the tours
Hashtag
seem to
not
be,
sponsored.
but wanna be.
But
It
wanna be,
seems
yeah.
like the tours are more grounded in reality these days,
Cool.
and
Yeah.
more so, they don't really present all of these rumors as fact anymore. They like speculate a little bit. They'll say, "Oh,
Mhm.
there are rumors that XYZ," but they don't say it like it's actually true. At least as far as I can tell. Again, haven't been on this tour,
And
and
also,
that's
if
great.
you
But
have been on one of the tours, please let us
yes,
know
oh my
what your
gosh, yeah,
experience was and how they give them and what you've heard.
I would
Because
love that.
yeah, to my knowledge, I don't know anyone who has, or if I do,
Me
they haven't
neither.
told me.
Well,
If
if
you're
anyone
listening, if you've
listening
been
has,
there, just let
yeah,
us know. I mean, I am
please do.
curious. Your
Yeah, we'll put a link
experience,
to
yeah.
the submit a story form in the show notes or
Mm-hmm.
something. But that's
Yeah.
all I had for you. Really, that's the entire story. And now I'm
Yeah.
committed to going to California with you so we can
I
go to
know.
this fucking
We
house.
need to go.
Yeah.
I know. We need to go. I had not heard the version that you just told, but all of the rumor stories that you mentioned, I've heard all of those. So that's interesting. This is one of those stories that, like you mentioned, a lot of her ignoring a president, allegedly, or, you know, her being in the news and blah, blah, blah. For people who do not live in America and do not have direct eye contact with guns on a regular basis, Winchester is huge. Like,
Massive.
like the amount of money that she got from that family fortune, as surprising as it is to us because we don't make $30,000 a day casually,
Yet.
that's not surprising at all based on, you know, the name Winchester here. Like, I think that that's important to kind of
That's a good
like
point.
drive home because of the way people spoke about her, because no one was talking about any of the men in the family that way. That's
No.
the
Mm-mm.
reason I want to bring that up. Like every cowboy movie you've ever seen, they're using Winchester guns, you know?
Yeah.
Like it was a big deal.
Bang, bang, you know?
Anyway, yeah, that's fascinating story. Fascinating perspective of the story. And also I love that you chose this for the cemetery month.
Oh
I
my
know
God.
that that
That's.
was something you were like, I know that that was something you were kind of working through, and I feel like that didn't get lost, but like we kind of like
I got lost.
but like it's the Winchester house, like you get lost, it's fine.
Yeah, that's
But that is
true.
something that, you know, that was one of the stories that like may or may not have been true based on everything
Mm-hmm.
you learned. Is that it was quote unquote meant to be a cemetery for spirits, and now it's almost like this perspective almost makes the story so much cooler because now there's like another layer of mystery to it, in
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it may not have been that mysterious at all. Like it was just some lady trying to live her life, but people
Yeah.
make that something when it often is not.
And she's mysterious in so many different ways. Like,
Yeah.
like who
Like
just
who all
designs a
did she
house for
donate
fun?
her,
Yeah.
and
Well,
who all
oh,
did she
okay. So
donate her
she
money to?
she donated her money. It was a variety of organizations. So she was really involved with the Red Cross. After the earthquake, she donated a lot of money to the San Jose Relief Fund. She donated a lot to the Save the Redwoods campaign, like tuberculosis wards, all
I
sorts
love
of stuff.
redwoods. Oh my god, I
Yeah,
love
she
Sarah
was so great.
Winchester.
Yeah.
Ugh,
She was awesome.
that is another underrated thing, completely unrelated to anything spooky. Have you ever been to the redwood forest? Have you ever seen redwoods?
No, I really
I
want
when
to.
my
It's
mom
on
and
my
I,
bucket
my mom,
list.
yeah, I would like to go again because my mom and I went to like San Francisco Napa area,
Mm.
whatever, last year or whatever. So we saw redwoods. Bleh, we saw redwoods, but they were like the small ones, and they were wild huge. There is a forest that has like, they're like super duper ancient trees, and we just saw the like
Gosh.
smaller ones. I
Because
don't
I
know how
remember
else to
those
say it.
pictures and they looked massive.
yeah, I was like sitting in a hollow tree. Anyway, this is completely unrelated to everything we're talking about. Shoot, what did you say right before that? Oh yeah, just her. I got excited because like it's so cool that she was like,
yeah,
like she really cared about things, you know.
she did.
Like
And that's
she
like,
did make an impact.
and I do like that she did it anonymously, because one of my big pet peeves is when people are like really performative and very loudly good people, quote unquote. Like it's,
Yeah. That is the
rubs me the
difference
wrong way.
between this is such a douchey thing to say because I am someone who like I do want people to know when I do cool things, but I also don't announce things. I just like will do something and then be like, hey, also this cool thing happened. But that's the difference between like, trying to act cool versus actually being cool. Like
Yeah.
people who don't give a fuck are like immediately cooler than the rest of us
I know.
because you don't give a fuck, you know?
I appreciate that you said the rest of us, because it's true.
I know. And I didn't mean you. I'm talking very much about me.
I include myself in this.
I'm like, I want to be cool. Yeah. But I feel like she actually was cool.
She was cool in so many fucking ways. I would have loved to have met her. I can only pray she will join Boy Jones in haunting me. I'm collecting
Well, yeah,
ghosts.
we can totally. You know what? She may not have had a seance, but it doesn't mean we can't have a seance. We can definitely call upon her and just get the answers directly from her.
I wonder if they'll let us do a seance in the Winchester Mystery House. I know that every Friday the 13th, they do like a lights off tour where you bring a flashlight and you wander. So if we hide in a dark corner, no one can stop us.
Gosh, see, immediately I'm like, that sounds so cool. And at the same time, fuck that. I am so scared of the dark. But that's something I need to like explore because why am I so afraid of the dark? I don't know.
You know what we could get you? You know those
Flashlight?
headlamps? No, a
Yes.
headlamp, but like 20 of them that are like all around your head. And so every direction is like lit up.
360 light.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
You can get a ring light and just put it on your face.
I have one of those. It's a reading light, but it goes around your neck, and it kind of makes me feel like an alien.
Oh, that's nice.
It's got two little flashlights here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's the thing I showed you.
Yeah.
My favorite shade of purple.
I remember that.
It's my favorite shade of purple. One of my favorite shades of purple. Yeah, it goes around your neck. So you can use it while you do other stuff too. Like if you're trying to like fix a sink or something else that I would not do.
I use mine when I paint my nails.
Me too. Yes, I forgot about that.
It's so good for that. Yeah.
Yes, I forgot about that. I haven't painted my nails in a long time. But yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you for sharing the story. I want to keep talking about this, but sadly, the episode does have to end. So,
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Little Spoons. Until next time, keep it cool.
Keep it creepy.